Hey everyone, hope everything's going well. Sorry about the bad news on the IB exams. As soon as I get more information on what's going on with that, I'll make sure it's posted so that you know all the things that are going on. Before we get started, I'd like to thank tonight's sponsor. It's Diet Coke. That's right, Diet Coke because I can. That's their actual slogan. Um, Diet Coke because I can. So thanks to Diet Coke for powering through this late night lecture. This is going to be a pretty quick one. We're going to talk about McCarthyism. It's pretty straightforward. If you had an English class, you probably read The Crucible and covered quite a bit of the themes of McCarthy. We'll try to quick chat about some of the things surrounding him because most of the era has really nothing to do with McCarthy. A lot of it has to do with the House of Un-American Activities and the federal government responses. So despite the fact that this whole era is really named after him, he's a relatively late comer to the game. So let's get this started. McCarthyism, 46 to 54-ish. You just want to think early 1950s. That's fine. Before we get into it, I think it's important to understand what's going on with the current world events at the time period. So if you just run down this little timeline here, in the late 40s, you've had huge issues over Germany, right? And that's really the cause of our Cold War. What are we going to do with Germany? How is it going to be united? How much are we going to support it? And so that's on people's minds. In 49, the Soviet Union tests a nuclear bomb, and that is a shock. At the time period, most of the experts thought the Soviets were quite a few years away from having a functional nuclear bomb, and then they detonate one in 49. So there's some fear about how in the world did they get this technology so fast. Remember the collapse of China in 1950 causes some fear about that. And then you have the Korean War, which again is making people question, are we safe? Is change coming? Is stability real? Are these goals that we fought for in World War II really attainable? And so you have a lot of things going on. I mean, shockingly, when people have instability in their life, they begin to panic. So something that we're getting a little too familiar with. I think the best place to start talking about McCarthyism is really in Hollywood, and I think that's where most of our focus on McCarthyism needs to be. So everything's going to come out of this organization called the House of Un-American Activities Committee. It's going to be called HUAC for short, but the House of Un-American Activities Committee. It was really started during World War II to explore people that were stopping the World War II war effort. But post-World War II, it really starts to explore some of the movies that were coming out of Hollywood and trying to understand the themes and why the themes were pro-Soviet. And I think if you look at it from a lens of World War II, these movies make a lot of sense. And you feel free to stop me talking and then click on these links in the accompanying PowerPoint. But Mission to Moscow is supposedly the true story of how Stalin is a great guy and how the Japanese and the Nazis have combined together in an attempt to take over the world. The North Star and the Song of Russia are both sort of love stories. The Song of Russia is an American man meets a Russian woman and they fall in love and all these things. And I think in the time period when these are produced, which is going to be 43, 44, 45-ish, we're trying to portray the Soviet Union as good best friends, is that Stalin is really just Uncle Joe, that we can all just get along, that there's really not that big of a difference between Stalin and the United States. And so these movies, I think, are trying to show that we're allies. But you'll notice down here, now this stupid thing keeps getting in my way, exit. No, not exit the PowerPoint. Oh, for goodness sakes. Down on the bottom when that little bar disappears, Senator Parnell, but more importantly, Senator Richard Milhouse Nixon, a new guy from California, are going to start exploring these as anti-American movies in which directors and actors and writers of these all knew exactly what was going on. I think that partially comes with FDR's death and the questioning of whether FDR actually knew what he was doing. remember at that Yalta conference, there's all these agreements that are made where the question is what was FDR's goal, and was he really thinking that he could manipulate Stalin and get Stalin to do what he wanted? So there's really questions about what exactly were the intentions of FDR, and was he getting duped by the Soviets? Were the Soviets playing him? On and on and on. But if you watch this link here, it's worth the 3 minutes from the Song of Russia. Watch it as hey, this is a pro-war movie where we're trying to be just like we're trying to show that we're just like the Russians, and then watch it again as hey, this is communist propaganda, try to teach people that communism is great, and you can start to see why people would start to question these movies, even though I don't think they're right in their questioning. You can click on these 2 links. What HUAC is going to start doing is subpoenaing actors. Congress has the ability to subpoena people. They don't have the ability to arrest or prosecute, but they can subpoena people. And so these are some of the more famous actors of the time. Robert Taylor, Ronald Reagan are going to get called before the House of Un-American Activities Committee to testify. Is there communists, or is there communism in Hollywood, and is it manipulating people's minds subliminally? That's not a word. Subliminally. Is there a communist plot going on? And these guys will name names, and there's dozens of people that get called before. If you start pleading the fifth, as some actors will, you're immediately assumed to be a communist. About 300 actors, directors, producers, tried is the wrong word, but are brought before the House of Un-American Activities. None are found guilty because you can't sentence anyone to prison from this. But what happens is actors are going to be destroyed from this, and hardly any of these people are going to work again. If you had Mr. Wagner freshman year and you watch Spartacus, that movie is groundbreaking for a couple reasons, but Stanley Kubrick used a bunch of blacklisted actors from these 300 in Spartacus. It was the first movie to say, try to make amends for what happened. Hollywood responds as private business responds to incentives. Hollywood responds to incentives, right? The goals of the United States government has changed, and so they start making movies to get them out of hot water with the United States government. So you can just look at the name of these movies. Guilty of Treason, The Red Menace. It's a cool little clip if you click on here that should be current. That it is. I don't know how to describe it. It's sophomoric. It's a great clip, a 4-minute little clip of how terrible communism is and what communists do and how they take over. I married a communist. I've never seen it, but maybe I will watch it because I have nothing else to do, and I'm sure it's on Netflix. Red Planet Mars, right? Get it? Red Planet, haha. I was a communist for the FBI. These are all movies that are coming out in the early 1950s and mid 1950s as a way of trying to respond to the anti-communist fervor that was coming out of Washington and HUAC. There's some argument that a lot of the alien movies made at the time period were what's the right word? Allegories for communism, right? Invasion of the Body Snatchers and things like that were actually anti-communist movies. There's one small-known movie that never actually made it to theaters, but Children of Communism was produced, and it was going to be about a recent outbreak of a disease that turned people into communists. And the only solution was isolation. However, the cure drives Americans insane, and it made it much easier for the Red Menace to take over the country. Here's a clip from that movie that was far, far too shocking to actually release to the American population.
The restaurant.